As I've said, we are trying now to bring different tests to this discussion. Will be Mr. Aidan Eyakuze. He's the executive director of Taweza, and this is an NGO. You see now how best, before he comes, maybe let me say some few things about him. So he's coming from a non-profit world, but still these are entities. People think about this when you're an NGO that there is free money. It's not. Somebody pays for the services. You are given money by a donor, but at the end of the day, he wants you to do something. So there is an intermediate sort of a hand here. Unlike in private entities, it's direct exchange. But somebody pays for this. But still, you are accountable. And the organization to be accountable has to deliver. So I think there is a test of stuff that is coming in. At the end of the day, is exchange of deliverables and social ends. So as I've said, he's executive director of Taweza East Africa. He's an economist, and Taweza works to enable children to learn, citizen exercise agents, and government to be more open and accountable to Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. In 2016, Mr. Eyakuze was appointed to the Global Steering Committee of Open Governance Partnership, where he served for 7 years, including civil society co-chair jointly with the government of Italy. He served as the global board of OGP, Open Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, and Open Contracting Partnership. In 2020, Aidan was named as one of the world 50 most influential people revolutionizing government by a Politico and the World Economic Forum. He has over 25 years experience as a scenario practitioner through participation in national scenario building initiative in Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, Nigeria. Aidan is a UWC, University of Western Cape alum, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu Leadership Fellow 2006, and a member of Open Global Leadership Network. This really exemplifies his leadership, not only here, but continent-wide and globally. And for those whom we know, Taweza, it has done a lot. So from this perspective, we really expect to learn a lot from this type of dimension of leadership and all that you've learned. Please join me to welcome Mr. Aidan Eyakuze to the podium. We know much about him, but he might give us more today. And he deserves more, guys. So thank you for your service today, please. And you're welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. This is a very cold room. Are you freezing like me? No, I'm kidding. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me for this session. I'm going to borrow from Leonard and then go off on a tangent. How much time do I have? 20 minutes? Yes. Okay. The title of Leonard's presentation was Innovative Leadership Can Enhance Business Performance, right? So here's my assertion. Innovative leadership changes the world. Not just an institution or organization, it changes the world. Without innovation, the world really doesn't change very much. And we've had periods of that in human history where for centuries nothing was happening. But innovative leadership really changes the world. And it changes the world in good ways and in bad ways. We've had some pretty innovative leaders who've changed the world in pretty terrible ways. Hitler is one of them, and others. Part of Leonard's presentation, I was taking notes, mentions the characteristics sort of innovative leadership, and two of them jumped out at me. One was excellent strategic vision, and the second one was persuasion, being persuasive. And so from that assertion that innovative leadership changes the world, I want to make the case to you that you need to innovate yourselves. Linda talked about innovating companies and processes and technologies. My argument is that you, in order to be innovative, the leadership to be innovative, you need to innovate yourself. And so I want to talk about the innovation of the person, of the individual, who is going to lead, who is going to create the change, good change that I think the world needs. And I'm going to argue that you need to innovate yourself in two areas only. So no long list of things, just two areas. But they're not easy. First area is you need to become an expert thinker. Yeah. And this is the link to Leonard's point about having excellent strategic vision. But in order to arrive at strategic vision and to articulate it, you need to do some pretty important expert or complex thinking. And that takes in a lot of information and input, analysis, understanding, distillation to see these are the issues. These are the main issues for my organization, for my country, for the world, for us to deal with. Yeah. And the second one is to be very good at what an author I shall tell you about in a moment says, complex communication. And that's, again, to Leonard's point about being persuasive. And complex communication isn't about communicating complexity. No. There's a difference. It's actually quite simple, but again, not easy to achieve or hard to do. It is to be able to get people to behave in the way that you want them to behave, in the way that you intend them to behave. Very good complex communicators are advertising copywriters. They're very good because they persuade you to spend your money on whatever it is that they want you to spend your money on, right? That is complex communication. And they tap into elements of human nature and human preferences and desires and fears and aspirations that get you to move your hand to the back of or into your wallet and to pay. That's complex communication. So I'm privileged to have worked with Leonard and Professor Musa Assad. Leonard was on the board of Twaweza for 6 years. And he guided us through some pretty interesting, turbulent times as well. And Professor Musa Assad is there now on the board of Twaweza. So if Twaweza has picked, not just from the NGO world, but also from the corporate world to help us do our work. And what is our work? And this comes to sort of, I was told personal anecdotes. So this is going to be a bit, personal anecdotes, my personal stories, not so much theory, but I try to, how should I put it, exercise or deploy what I learn in the theory or in the readings that I do in the work that I do. I was in Oxford at a Skoll Foundation meeting. Skoll is what they call the World Economic Forum of donors and foundations in Oxford in April. This is the first time in my life. And I was told, everybody is networking really furiously for 3 days, so you better get your pitch down to something that is short, simple, and memorable. So I said, how do I describe Twaweza? We've got this long 20-page strategic plan. How do I distill it to a few words, an elevator pitch? And so it came to my mind, speaking to some Americans. They asked me, so, Aidan, what does Twaweza do? And into my head popped this, we build democracies. You know what? That's not the end of the conversation. That's the start of a conversation. Oh, you do? Tell me more. And that's what I want. That's the one I will hear. Tell me more. Right? And that is an element of complex communication. I need to get that person on the other side with a big checkbook to tell me more. Right? So we do. That's actually, summary, what Twaweza does. We try to make governments more accountable to the citizens. That's it. That's our work. But it means you have to get citizens to demand more of their governments, not easy, right? And to get governments to listen and prioritize what citizens are saying they want, also not easy. Yeah. But that's, in terms of expert thinking, that is what we need to do. Now, in the context of let me generalize this a little bit more. The reason for us to become really good at expert thinking is because the world and our societies and our countries and our communities are facing a whole range of what they call wicked problems. There are 3 types of problems. There are tame problems, it can be very difficult to solve and answer, but they have a solution. A tame problem has a solution, a correct answer at the end. A formula you apply and you get the output that you require and desire. That's a tame problem. Yeah. Building a bridge can be very complicated, but there's a right way of building a bridge and a wrong way of building a bridge. That's a tame problem, okay? Then there are wicked problems. Wicked problems do not have a right answer. They have degrees of better or worse. So all you're doing is moving from worse to better, hopefully. Those are wicked problems. Climate change is a wicked problem. There isn't a correct answer. Apply this formula and you've sorted out climate change. Interpersonal relationships are wicked problems. So let's talk about, interpersonal relationships are wicked problems. You're constantly negotiating and navigating from not so good to, yeah, this is not bad. Right? And so to expert thinking, the ability to gather information from all sorts of spaces and places to understand what the issue is, to distill it to its essence, and then to try and resolve it, move it from a bad or a worse situation to a better situation constantly. That requires expert thinking. It also means that you are constantly taking in information. But I think, as Leonard was saying, innovation means that you are constantly disrupting what you think you knew and understood. Yeah. In order to be able to navigate the much more complex environment in which we find. It says in the theme there something to do with the complex business environment or the dynamic business environment of this day. When we were writing our strategy, I wrote the strategy for Twaweza last year. We wrote the strategy for the Open Government Partnership also last year. We tried to understand into what world are we trying to put this strategy into. I have the special privilege of working with the government of Tanzania to help draft the Vision 2050 process with 21 or 22 other people on the team. And we're trying to understand the next 25 years, what are the global contexts that we're going to have to face? This isn't just for a country, but this is also for you who are running institutions. And there are 5, I'm going to mention 9, 5 tough things, 4 opportunities. The 5 tough things. Number 1, we are currently facing a fragile and fragmenting global economy. The hegemony of the West is being challenged very vehemently by the resurgent East, India and China. So the world economy we went through a process of nice globalization, everything was opening up, and now the economy is becoming much more fragile and fragmented. We're going to have to deal with that context. It's complicated. Second one, widening inequality, both within countries and between countries, and the social fracture that comes with it. If you try to understand the deep underlying forces that are creating the xenophobia, the anti-immigration, the all sorts of things that are splitting, American societies, European societies, a big part of it is rising inequality. That is driving social fracture. Again, a wicked problem. Third, of course, this one I won't dwell on too much, intensifying climate change effects. I have a cousin who lives in Houston, and they're here visiting. They told me this year, I think, or was it last year, they spent days in temperatures ranging between 40 and 45 degrees Celsius, and the power cut. He said, that's Houston, Texas. I'm not talking about here. Intensifying climate change effects, and they're not going to get any better. We're going to have to find a way to survive intensifying climate change effects. Number 4, my favorite, my most challenging, democracy being under attack everywhere you look in the world. The authoritarians have their own private meetings around about the UN General Assembly in the basement. This is how we're going to fix those NGOs. This is how we're going to fix those CSOs. Because you see, the laws and the rules and the regulations all over the world are sounding incredibly similar. Whether it's Kenya, now copying from Tanzania, because they are. whether it's anti-money laundering, whatever. A lot of it is squeezing the ability of civil society and civic spaces to be free, open, and able to hold what? Governments to account to their citizens. It's becoming harder. Democracy is under attack all over the world. And the fifth one, almost as powerful as the force of gravity itself, is disruptive demographic transitions. There are many parts of the world which are getting old, very old. They're not replacing their populations. And then there's this wonderful continent, the most productive producer of human beings on the planet. Very productive. But we're not able to employ them. So the old world that is getting old does not want to import labor from the new world that is getting younger. Yeah. And that's going to be disruptive. So the new world is sending them across on boats. Doesn't matter, as much as they can. But then there's a reaction in the old. We're going to have to deal with this as people. So those are some of the turbulent times, which require, like I said, expert thinking. How do we navigate this? But there are some, I think, opportunities, some of which Leonard mentioned, and I'll touch. The first one is big opportunity in the digital and biotechnology boost to productivity across the board, whether it's agriculture or manufacturing or services. Digital and biotech is going to massively boost productivity, make some people very wealthy. And so here's a problem. How do you make sure that then that wealth is equitably distributed? Yeah. To avoid the social fracture that comes with too much of a disparity of income and wealth. As a result of digital and biotech, we are able then to also export in physical form or embedded form labor. In physical form, have you guys been to the airport recently and see all those young people going off to the Middle East for work? It doesn't happen so much here in Tanzania, but every time I leave Kampala or every time I leave Nairobi, you can see the groups of usually young women in uniform going off to the Middle East. There's a lot of export of labor, voluntary and involuntary, from here to there. Can we make it much more formal? Can we make it much more embedded in our products and services rather than physically moving our human beings to other places? So that's an opportunity. The third one, if indeed the world is fragmenting and there's competition from the East and the West, then maybe we should think about pivoting even more to the large dynamic Asian economies. China, India, Malaysia, other places. Yeah. Let's be deliberately engaged with perhaps deepening and extending our economic relationships with those new dynamic emerging economies. And the fourth one, opportunity, the transition to clean energy services, I think also offers opportunities for us to make a difference in our own economies, in our own countries, for our own populations. So these are the contexts in which we are trying to build democracies as we try to do it into ours. But back to the individual innovation, innovating yourself. So I mentioned the expert thinking and the complex communication. And perhaps what I can do to make it more concrete is talk about how we've tried to do it, or at least I've tried to do it in Travis. As I was introduced, I am an economist by training, and my first job was sort of consulting, management consulting, improving the productivity of mostly Kenyan parastatals for the first 5 years, the Kenya Tea Development Agency, Kenya Ports Authority, and other places. I worked in Kenya for the first 5 years because when I got back here, there were no jobs to be had here. After 5 years in Kenya, a bank called me and said, come, we've got a job for you. So I came and I was a banker for 5 years in Tanzania. I learned a great deal in the first 3 years and was terribly bored in the next 2. And so I quit banking. And I went into research and analysis and policy analysis for 9 years. And that's when I began to expand and extend my own understanding of a whole range of things. I did a lot of work in inequality and in regional integration in East Africa. So I got to understand what are the things that work in terms of regional integration and those things which are maybe a lot more problematic. And the irony is we are very, very enthusiastic about integrating all sorts of things except for one. We want freedom of movement of goods, funds, services. The one thing we really are very nervous about moving is people. Yeah. That's the one where we, especially Tanzanians, we really don't like the freedom of movement of people. And that sadly intensifies or extends the inequality. It reduces the opportunity for equalizing the incomes, usually upwards. When you have much greater freedom of movement, productivity goes from where it is not so productive to where it's much more productive. And, people benefit from the income and the wealth that is created. So I learned about all of those things, and especially the drivers of inequality. And then Twaweza came and found me and persuaded me that perhaps I should become the head of a civil society organization. I'd never done that before, so it was terrifying. For the first 2.5 years, I was holding on for dear life because this is a behemoth that I inherited. We've shrunk it down. We've right-sized it a little bit because we're doing some really enormous research to understand here another wicked problem. Why are children in school, but so many of them are not learning? So we had to connect and collect a lot of data. Yeah. So we did that. We persuaded the government that actually it is very important to focus on learning outcomes, not just people in schools with desks and books and classrooms. We need to get learning outcomes as a priority. And so what Twaweza innovated before my time, I found them, 2 years into this, is something that is quite heretical in the teaching profession. Rewarding teachers for outputs. Rewarding teachers for kids' learning outcomes. Cash on delivery. You people in business know about cash on delivery. So we innovated a cash on delivery for teachers, and we're calling it Q Funza, Q ya kujifunza. And in a nutshell, we tell teachers, we go to their classrooms and we tell them, we're going to assess your children, and then we're going to go away again. And then we're going to come back and assess them in November, and if they've done well, we're going to pay you a cash bonus for their improvement in learning outcomes, foundational learning, literacy and numeracy, grades 1, 2, and 3. Everybody cares about standard 7. Hardly anybody looks at the grades 1, 2, and 3. But that is where foundational learning and numeracy happens. That's where you plant the seed. Yeah. So we told teachers in grades 1, 2, and 3, we will give you a bonus if your kids learn. And we're finding lots of rigorous, independent analysis with some of the best brains in the world have found that we have an effect equivalent to a 30% improvement in learning outcomes compared to the business as usual scenario. And as a result, we started with 100 schools. We're now 265 schools. Our aim is to go to 2,000 schools across the country in the most challenged environments. Yeah, not all the schools, not in Dar es Salaam, but in the most challenged environments in Kigoma, in Tunduma, and places like that. Yeah. So this was, and the challenge with this, it sounds, the challenge with this is that it can actually be transformative if children actually learn the basics. Some of you who have got maybe, how many professors of university students in here? Professor Musa Assad. Professors will quietly tell you, my first year students, changamoto. But they were grades 1, 2, and 3 students at some point, So we're trying to deal with the challenge there at the foundation. And that's part of this expert thinking in trying to deal with this wicked problem of weak learning outcomes. How do you generate a country which is productive, wealthy, prosperous, if so many of your population have a serious problem with basic literacy and basic numeracy? Did you know that 7 out of 10 adults have a problem multiplying and dividing in this country? 7 out of 10 have a problem multiplying and dividing. 7 out of 10. Yeah. So Wicked problem, eh? We're trying to persuade government to invest maybe 50 billion shillings a year in a special teacher innovation, a teacher sort of incentive fund. Hiyo kazi ngumu kweli. Bado. So wish us luck. The second piece, which is important for us to, and I want to also give you some anecdotal examples, is complex communication. And remember what I said. This is to persuade somebody with whom you're communicating to take a specific action which you'd like them to take. It's not enough. There are 3 elements of communication. This is just the Aidan theory. 3 objectives of communicating. 1 is to raise awareness. 2, to raise understanding. Somebody can know something without understanding it. But the 3rd one is to get them to act on it. Yeah. To act, to do something. And so this is the crux of complex communication, to both raise awareness, deepen understanding, but also for people to take action on that. Now, how does this link with defending democracy? So I'll give you 3 examples. 2022, I think it was, or 2021. I think 2022. The government instituted a new tax, which you all remember, Tozo. Remember Tozo? Huh? You remember Tozo? Mobile money transactions levy. And we at Tozo thought, gosh, we've been here before. Do you remember in 2014, I think, when there was a SIM card tax? Do you remember that? You do remember. What did you think of both of these things? Maybe I should do a survey. Who was in favor of the SIM card tax? Who was in favor of the Tozo? Okay. Let me now test your political. Who was against Tozo? So even the SIM card tax, whether polled Tanzanians, we asked them, what do you think of this? They said, we don't like it. And we went back to government and said, Tanzanians don't like this. It is regressive because everybody, whether you are a rich billionaire or a young person who's without a job but need a SIM card, you pay the same amount of tax, 1,000 shillings every month for a SIM card. Very regressive tax, So this is unfair. It is unpopular. Think about removing it. We made a little bit of noise and it was removed. It was changed from a SIM card tax to an excise tax on airtime. A bit more fair. So the more airtime you use, the more tax you pay. A bit fairer, right? So Tozo comes and said, we've seen this play before. We've seen this movie before. Let's ask Tanzanians. And we did. And we were collaborating to some extent with the Ministry of Finance. We did the survey. We said, let's go and share the results. And they told us, hold on. So in March, and they raised an important question. They raised an important issue, which was, well, you've asked Tanzanians what they think and whether they like it or not, but have you asked them whether they know what's going to be useful? And we said, no. And you're right. So let's go back and ask them. So we spent a whole bunch of money. We redid the survey within 2 months and asked them, so do you know how this money is going to be used? And do you approve with the intention of using the funds as designated? And they still came back and said, we understand the importance of paying taxes and levies, but this one here is too high and it is unfair. So we went back. The government tried to say, hold on, don't publish that. Now that we know, don't go public. We said, we actually asked them, we made a commitment that when we do these surveys, we will go public. And so we went public. And it created quite a debate. And I had to find myself doing a lot of complex communication on radio and television and explaining, because there was quite a bit of dis and misinformation, a reinterpretation of the data that we put out there to make the government look good. But after a lot of debate, October, the Tozo was removed. Yeah, the Tozo was removed. So we used our expert thinking. How do you run a nationally representative, credible survey, to ask an important question, to inform a public debate, to persuade and advocate for a particular result. And it worked. Yeah. But there's a lot of things happening in the background there that I had to get up to speed on, to learn, and to persuade my colleagues that we need to take some of these risks of not necessarily doing exactly what the government wanted us to do, because we were trying to remain true to our mission, amplifying citizens' voices so that governments will become more responsive to citizens' priorities. Yeah, simple. 2 more examples. Statistics Act. You might remember that, right, Dr. George? It was changed back in 2018. Again, because some data we put out in the public domain was inconvenient. Yeah. So they changed the Statistics Act to shut off the pipeline or the ability or the freedom of researchers to collect data, analyze it, and publish it independently. So they changed the act. We had to decide, what do we do with this thing? Do we obey in advance, or do we reassert Article 18 of our Constitution, which is all about the freedom of expression, including scientific expression? So we gathered coalitions of other researchers and some other institutions, some of them global, and we made a very strong case to the government that this was not a good idea for the development of knowledge and understanding in this country, that the government will decide what is valid or invalid to collect data and statistics on. And 9 months later, we persuaded them to remove the offending clauses. So June 30th, 2019 it was, yes. It was changed. And you can still now freely collect data and publish it independently. Again, a lot of work, complex communication with government to get them to change. Then the third example, back to Costech. Hey, George, you really caused a lot of trouble. Back to Costech. About 2 years ago, a draft bill comes out suggesting that Costech's Act was going to be changed so that they would also have the final say on any and all research being done in the country. It sounded almost medieval. In the medieval times, you couldn't say or do anything without the bishop and the priest and the pope saying it was okay, including science. So when I read that and I, compared it to what I understood about the church history in medieval Europe, I said, we're going back to medieval Europe with this particular act here. And literally, that is actually how, when we were invited to Amaoni, to speak to the parliamentary committee responsible for that, that is precisely the example that we used. And we said, we are going to kill research in this country. All of the funding that comes to support our universities, our research institutions, is going to do a hard break at the border if this thing passes. If government will decide what is worthy or not of research. To their credit, he didn't even go to the floor of parliament. He went back to the drafters and he was killed. Yeah, right there. So why am I giving you these examples? I told you in the beginning, what are we about as Twaweza? Building democracies, defending the rights of citizens to hold their governments to account, and persuading governments to be responsive to citizens' priorities, preferences, requests, requirements, and desires. Yeah. But the way we try to do so, and that's how we want to change the world. Yeah. But the way we have tried to do so, the way I have tried to do so, has meant that I have had to innovate my kind of leadership in those 2 ways, become much better, stronger. It's still a work in progress, as Leonard was saying with him, at expert thinking, understanding from a variety of inputs what is the nature of the problem, its essence, and what might be some of the solutions, or at least direction of travel to move from a worse situation to a better situation. And the second piece is to learn how to do complex communication, which is very simply put is about persuading your counterpart to take a course of action that you would like for them to do in order for their benefit or your benefit. But that is important, that they take action, not just enough to hear, to understand, nakubali, no, but to take specific action. So I'll end with just some advice and one book recommendation. Yeah. Number one, the advice: you have to constantly learn, unlearn, relearn, reinvent, innovate yourself all the time in order to be able to handle and to navigate and surf, as they call it, some of the wave surfers, the turbulent times in which we find ourselves in. Yeah. Number two, figure out how to do complex communications. It's not enough to say, lakini nimemwambia. No. Lakini ameelewa. No. What have they done with the information and the understanding that you have planted in their mind and in their heart? Yeah, be good at complex communication. So the book recommendation, which I read last year, and I keep rereading because it's so good. It's called On Grand Strategy. On Grand Strategy. It's good for politicians. It's good for business people. And it's about the really big grand strategy. How to win wars. How to wage campaigns and win wars. But it has so many lessons for how to run organizations, but also how to handle yourself as an individual, as a leader, in order to be able to wage battle and win wars. Whatever your war is, a hot war like Ukraine and Russia, interpersonal conflict like in our families, or social challenges such as development, income growth, social cohesion, all of these things. These are all challenges. And I think this book, On Grand Strategy, by John Lewis Gaddis, a professor of history, I think at Princeton or Yale, I can't remember which one of those places, is a very good book with lots of examples from Queen Elizabeth I to Roosevelt to Napoleon to all sorts of other interesting people, on how they battled their particular situations and, for some, changed the world for the better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aidan, and this is quite a thoughtful discussion, and I hope it has add value to what our first speaker made in terms of presentation. I think we're building up to where we are. And if you may, during the panel discussion, I would really think that probably you can try to relate more in terms of expert thinking and complex communication as it really plays now in our private businesses. Because I see it cutting across as long as you have an entity organization, but you can talk more around this, how best this reflects now the private entities. Because sometimes it could be I have my own company, this is private, I decide what I want, I speak what I want, you're going to follow it or not. If you don't want, go. So that's how we do in most cases, no? Not all businesses are built to a level that maybe the owner is not even part of business. So we're going to have this business where I sit there as director and I decide what I want. How this now is critical to such kind of level of business also. So I think maybe you can expand on that so that we gauge. Because the way it looks to me, it's more on the big picture where you have a company, but you're not seen there even once. Maybe you're coming to the board meeting. So you've employed the expert people doing for you. But we have these companies where I sit there daily and make decisions. I make communication to my staff. I speak what I want. And if you take it or leave it. So I think these are some of the things that maybe when you come back, you can try to relate this, how best this can improve this kind of organization that we have for business entities. Just my request for that.